The stranger appeared at the ranch gate, just as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Her dark hair matted with dust, and her dress torn at the hem. And Garrett Branson knew immediately she was running from something that terrified her more than death itself. He stood from where he had been mending fence posts near the barn, wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. The woman remained at the gate, not entering the property but not leaving either. Her stance was rigid, prepared to bolt at any sudden movement. Garrett approached slowly, the way he would a skittish horse, keeping his hands visible and his movements deliberate. "Madam," he called out when he was within speaking distance, "you lost." She watched him with dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his appearance, from his worn leather boots to the revolver at his hip. When she spoke, her English was clear but accented, each word carefully chosen. "I need work. I can clean, cook, mend clothes. I work hard." Garrett stopped a respectful distance away, noting the bruise on her cheekbone that was beginning to yellow at the edges, several days old at least. "Well, I could use some help around here. My housekeeper left last month to care for her sick sister. What are your wages?" "No money," she said quickly, shaking her head. "Food only, place to sleep, nothing else." That gave him pause. In all his 32 years running this ranch outside Terlingua, Texas, he had never heard anyone refuse wages. The year was 1879, and times were hard enough that most folks needed every dollar they could earn. A woman refusing payment entirely raised questions he was not sure he should ask. "What's your name?" he asked instead. She hesitated, her fingers gripping the weathered wood of the gate post. "Danielle Logan." The name was too American, too convenient, and Garrett knew in that moment she was lying. But he also recognized the desperation in her eyes, the way her shoulders tensed as if expecting rejection or worse. He thought of his own mother, who had died when he was 15, and how she had always told him to help those in need when he could. "All right, Miss Logan," he said, emphasizing the name she had given him. "I can offer you work for room and board. There's a small cabin out back where my housekeeper used to stay. It has a good stove and a decent bed. You can start tomorrow if you want to rest up first." Relief flooded her features so quickly she had to turn away to compose herself. When she looked back at him, her expression was carefully neutral again. "I start now. I work now." Garrett nodded and opened the gate, stepping aside to let her pass. She moved past him with the grace of someone accustomed to moving silently through difficult terrain. As she walked toward the main house, he noticed she favored her left leg slightly, another injury she was trying to hide. The ranch house was a sprawling structure built by Garrett's father 20 years earlier, constructed from adobe and timber with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Inside, dust had accumulated on most surfaces, and dishes sat unwashed in the kitchen basin. Garrett was not a slovenly man by nature, but the demands of running a cattle ranch alone left little time for domestic concerns. Danielle surveyed the interior with a practiced eye, already mentally cataloging what needed attention first. "You have other workers?" she asked. "3 ranch hands who stay in the bunkhouse about a quarter-mile that way." Garrett gestured west. "They take their meals here usually, but they have been making do with their own cooking lately. Fair warning, they will be mighty pleased to have decent food again." She nodded, moving to the kitchen and rolling up her sleeves. Her forearms bore more bruises, these ones fresher, in shades of purple and green. Garrett pretended not to notice as he showed her where supplies were kept. "I will need to ride into town tomorrow for provisions," he said. "You need anything specific?" "No." Her response was immediate, almost defensive. "I need nothing from town." Another red flag, but Garrett let it pass. He showed her the cabin where she would stay, a tidy structure with plastered walls and a window that faced east toward the sunrise. She examined it with the same thorough assessment she had given the main house, and he saw her shoulders relax incrementally when she deemed it satisfactory. "Thank you," she said softly, and Garrett heard the weight of genuine gratitude in those two words. He left her to settle in and returned to his work, but his mind kept wandering back to the mysterious woman who had appeared at his gate. Apache, he was certain, despite the attempt at an Anglo name. Her features, her bearing, the careful way she moved through space all spoke to her heritage. And the fact that she was hiding it, combined with her refusal of money and fear of town, suggested she was running from her own people. The Apache Wars had been raging for years, with various bands resisting the government's attempts to force them onto reservations. Garrett had no love for the brutal tactics employed by the army, and he had seen enough bloodshed to last a lifetime. If this woman had fled her tribe, she must have had good reason, and he was not inclined to turn her over to anyone without understanding the full situation. That evening, Danielle prepared supper with ingredients that had been languishing in Garrett's pantry. She made a simple stew with dried beef, beans, and vegetables from his struggling garden, but she added herbs he did not recognize that transformed the meal into something remarkable. When the ranch hands came in for dinner, they stopped short at the sight of a woman in the kitchen. "Boys, this is Miss Logan," Garrett introduced her. "She will be helping out around here from now on." The three men nodded respectfully, removing their hats. There was young Timothy Walsh, barely 20 with red hair and freckles that made him look even younger. Next was Frank Donovan, a weathered cowboy in his 50s who had worked for Garrett's father. And finally, there was Sam Pierce, a quiet man of about Garrett's age who had drifted onto the ranch 3 years ago and proven himself invaluable with horses. They ate with the enthusiasm of men who had been subsisting on burned beans and tough jerky for weeks. Danielle served them but did not sit to eat with them, instead waiting until they had finished and cleaning up while she consumed her own modest portion standing by the stove. After the hands had returned to the bunkhouse, Garrett lingered in the kitchen. "You do not have to wait on us like servants," he said. "You are welcome to sit at the table." "This is better," she replied, scrubbing a pot with more force than necessary. "I eat after. It is my way." He wanted to argue but sensed it would be futile. Instead he asked, "That limp you are trying to hide, should I fetch the doctor from town?" Her hands stilled in the wash water. "No doctor, no one from town, it is healing already." "How did it happen?" She turned to face him, her expression guarded. "I fell. It does not matter." Garrett held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But if you need medical attention, you tell me. I do not care what you are running from or why. Nobody deserves to suffer when help is available." Something shifted in her eyes, a crack in the armor she had constructed around herself. "You are kind, kinder than you should be to a stranger. My mother always said kindness costs nothing and might mean everything to the person receiving it." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There are extra blankets in the chest at the foot of your bed. Nights get cold out here." She watched him leave, and for the first time since arriving, she allowed herself to feel the exhaustion that had been pursuing her for days. When she finally made her way to the cabin, she barred the door and wedged a chair under the handle before collapsing onto the bed. Sleep came quickly, but it was filled with nightmares of angry faces and the sound of her brother's voice calling her a traitor. The next morning, Garrett woke to the smell of fresh bread and coffee. He dressed quickly and found his kitchen transformed. Every surface gleamed, the floors had been swept and mopped, and Danielle was pulling golden loaves from the oven. She had also done something to his coffee that made it taste better than any he had brewed himself. "You have been up since before dawn," he observed, accepting the cup she handed him. "I wake early, always." She set a plate before him with eggs, bacon, and thick slices of the fresh bread slathered with butter. "You need to eat well. Ranch work is hard." As he ate, she moved through the house with quiet efficiency, and he marveled at how she seemed to anticipate what needed doing without being told. When he rode out to check the cattle in the northern pasture, he returned at midday to find his clothes washed and hanging on the line. His torn shirt mended so skillfully he could barely see where the tear had been. Days turned into a week, and a routine established itself. Danielle proved to be an exceptional worker, rising before the sun and continuing until well after dark. She maintained the house, prepared meals that had the ranch hands singing her praises, and even began tending the garden with knowledge that coaxed life from plants Garrett had nearly given up on. But she remained guarded, speaking only when necessary and never sharing anything personal. She avoided the ranch hands unless serving them meals, and she never ventured beyond the immediate ranch property. Whenever Garrett mentioned riding into Terlingua, she found urgent tasks that required her presence at the ranch. It was Frank Donovan who first voiced what they were all thinking. The old cowboy approached Garrett one afternoon while they were checking fence lines in the southern section. "That girl is Apache," Frank said without preamble. "You know that, right, boss?" Garrett kept his eyes on the fence post he was examining. "I know she is not who she claims to be. She is running from something or someone." Frank spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "I have seen enough Apache in my years to recognize the signs. The way she moves, the way she watches everything, how she never lets anyone get behind her. Those are survival instincts, and she is scared." "You planning to turn her in?" Garrett asked, his voice carefully neutral. Frank looked offended. "Hell no. That girl works harder than any 3 men I have known, and her cooking alone is worth protecting. I am just saying, whatever she is running from might come looking. You need to be prepared for that." Garrett had been thinking the same thing, but hearing it voiced made the concern more concrete. "Keep your eyes open. If anyone comes around asking questions, I want to know immediately." That night, after the hands had retired to the bunkhouse and the dishes were cleaned, Garrett found Danielle sitting on the porch steps of her cabin, staring up at the stars. He approached slowly, giving her time to acknowledge his presence. "May I sit?" he asked. She nodded, shifting slightly to make room on the step. They sat in silence for a while, the night sounds of the ranch filling the space between them. A coyote called in the distance, and Danielle's head tilted toward the sound, listening with an intensity that spoke of deep familiarity. "I need to know if you are in danger," Garrett said finally. "Not your whole story if you are not ready to share it, but whether I should be watching for someone coming to take you back." She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she did speak, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My tribe would kill me if they found me, or worse, take me back to marry the man I ran from." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Garrett felt anger rise in his chest, hot and protective. "Who?" "His name does not matter. He is old, cruel, and my father promised me to him before I was grown." She wrapped her arms around herself despite the warmth of the evening. "I said no. Apache women have the right to refuse marriage, but he would not accept my refusal. He said I had dishonored him, that I needed to be taught respect. My own brother sided with him, said I was bringing shame to our family." "So you ran?" "I ran," she confirmed. "But running from the tribe, leaving without permission, is also considered shameful. They will not simply let me go. If they find me, they will either drag me back or kill me as an example to others who might think to leave." Garrett absorbed this information, understanding now the depth of her fear. "Are you truly Apache? I mean no disrespect, but your English is excellent and you gave yourself an Anglo name." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "My mother was Mexican, taken by the tribe when she was young. She taught me Spanish and some English. When I ran, I knew I would need to pass as Mexican or white to survive. Danielle Logan seemed like a good American name. What is your real name?" She looked at him then, truly looked at him, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she said, "Dahzi, it means strong one." "Dahzi," he repeated, the syllables feeling right in his mouth. "It suits you better than Danielle." "Here, I must be Danielle. Dahzi died when she left her people." "Maybe not died," Garrett said gently. "Maybe just waiting until it is safe to live again." She turned back to the stars, but he saw the glimmer of tears she was trying to hide. They sat together until the moon rose high, and when Garrett finally rose to leave, he said, "You are safe here. I give you my word. Anyone who tries to take you will have to go through me first." "Why?" she asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Why would you risk yourself for someone you barely know?" "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I am starting to think that you showing up at my gate might be one of the better things that has happened to me in a long while." He left her with that thought, returning to his house and lying awake far into the night, thinking about dark eyes that held too much pain and a woman brave enough to choose freedom over security. The following weeks brought a subtle shift in their dynamic. Dahzi, still using the name Danielle around the ranch hands, began to relax incrementally. She started joining them for meals, sitting at the far end of the table and speaking little, but present. She laughed once at something Timothy said, a sound so unexpected and beautiful that everyone stopped eating to stare at her in surprise. Garrett found himself looking for excuses to be near her, to engage her in conversation, or simply share space in companionable silence. He learned that she loved the early mornings best, when the world was still quiet and the sun painted the desert in shades of gold and pink. He began rising earlier himself, and they would often share coffee on the porch before the day's work began. One morning, about 6 weeks after her arrival, Garrett found her in the garden, speaking softly in what he assumed was Apache to the plants as she tended them. She looked up guiltily when she noticed him watching. "My mother taught me," she explained, reverting to English. "She said plants grow better when you talk to them, when you thank them for the food they provide." Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. Sadness crossed Dahzi's face. "She died when I was 12. Fever took her. After that, my father changed. He became harder, more determined that I follow Apache ways completely, as if he could erase the Mexican part of me that reminded him of her." Garrett crouched beside her in the garden dirt. "I lost my mother young too. I was 15. She got thrown from a horse and hit her head. Gone before the doctor could even arrive from town." They shared the silence of mutual understanding, the grief that never fully leaves when you lose a parent too soon. Dahzi reached out, a gesture that seemed unconscious, and touched his hand briefly before pulling back. "I am sorry," she said. "Me too." He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "I am heading into town today. Sure you do not need anything?" The familiar wariness returned to her eyes. "No, thank you, Dahzi," he said softly, using her real name when they were alone as had become his habit. "Eventually you will need to leave this ranch, even if just to go into town. You cannot hide here forever." "Why not?" she challenged. "I have everything I need here. Food, shelter, work. Why must I risk going where someone might recognize me? Because that is not living, it is just surviving." "There is a difference." She stood abruptly, anger flashing in her eyes. "You do not understand. You have never had to hide who you are just to stay alive. You do not know what it is like to always be looking over your shoulder, wondering if today is the day they find you." "You are right," he said calmly. "I do not understand fully, but I know that fear is a prison just as real as any cell, and I would like to help you find a way to be free of it." She turned away from him, her shoulders rigid. "There is no freedom for me. Not while my tribe searches for me. Not while the man who claims ownership of me still lives. I made my choice when I ran. This is the consequence." Garrett wanted to argue, to tell her there had to be another way, but he sensed that pushing now would only drive her further into her shell. Instead, he went into town as planned, his mind churning with the problem of how to help a woman whose past was hunting her. Terlingua was a small mining town that had grown up around the mercury deposits in the area. It was rough and dusty, populated by miners, ranchers, and the various merchants and service providers who catered to them. Garrett made his usual rounds, purchasing supplies and catching up on local news at the general store. It was there that he heard troubling information. The storekeeper, a garrulous man named Herbert Morrow, mentioned that a group of Apache men had been seen in the area the previous week. "Apache," Garrett kept his voice casual. "Thought most of the bands had been pushed south or onto the reservations." "Most have," Herbert agreed, measuring out flour into a cloth sack. "But there are still some holdouts, small groups that refuse to go. These ones were asking about a woman specifically. Described her as having Mexican blood, spoke good English. Said she was stolen from them and they wanted her back." Garrett's hand tightened on the counter. "What did you tell them?" "Truth is, I had not seen anyone matching that description. Told them as much." Herbert tied off the flour sack and set it aside. "But I got to thinking later, that new housekeeper of yours, the one who came to town with you about a month back, she had dark hair and features that could be Mexican or Apache. You might want to be careful, Garrett. Apache can be unpredictable when they think their property has been taken." "She is not property," Garrett said sharply, then caught himself. "And the woman working for me is named Danielle Logan, came from El Paso looking for work, not who they are looking for." Herbert raised his hands in a placating gesture. "No offense meant. Just thought you should know there are Apache asking around. Might be wise to keep your eyes open." Garrett finished his business in town quickly and headed back to the ranch, his mind racing. The fact that they were searching for Dahzi this far from wherever she had fled from indicated a determination that worried him. This was not a casual search. They were actively hunting her. When he arrived back at the ranch, he found Dahzi in the kitchen as usual, but something was different. She was moving with jerky, agitated motions, and he noticed she had positioned herself where she could see both doors. "What happened?" he asked immediately. She shook her head. "Nothing, I am fine." "Dahzi," he said firmly, moving closer but careful not to crowd her. "Tell me." Her hands stilled in the bread dough she was kneading. "This morning, after you left, I saw riders in the distance. They did not come close, but I recognized the way they sat their horses. Apache scouts." Garrett cursed softly. "They were in town last week asking about you." The color drained from her face. "Then they know I am here, or they suspect." "They do not know for certain," he said, trying to calm her visible panic. "The storekeeper told them he had not seen anyone matching your description, and I reinforced that my housekeeper is from El Paso." "But we need to be careful," she laughed bitterly. "Careful? If they are watching the ranch, it is only a matter of time before they see me, before they know for certain. And then they will come and there will be blood. Your blood, maybe, for harboring me. Is that what you want? To die protecting someone you met 6 weeks ago, if it comes to that," he said steadily. "Then yes." She stared at him in disbelief. "You are insane. You barely know me." "I know enough," he replied. I know you are brave and strong. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you sing to plants in your mother's language and make the best bread in Texas. I know that you deserve to be free to live your life without fear. Is that not enough?" Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Why? Why do you care so much?" Garrett took a risk and stepped closer, gently wiping the tears from her face with his thumb. "Because somewhere in the last 6 weeks, you became important to me. Because I wake up looking forward to morning coffee with you. Because your smile, rare as it is, makes my whole day better. Because I think I am falling in love with you, Dahzi, and I will be damned if I let anyone take you away or hurt you." She looked up at him with wide eyes, vulnerable in a way he had never seen her. "You cannot love me. You do not even know all of me." "Then tell me," he urged. "Tell me everything, and let me decide what I can handle." So she did. Standing in his kitchen with flour on her hands and tears on her face, Dahzi told him everything. She spoke of her childhood, split between her mother's gentle Mexican teachings and the fierce Apache ways of her father's people. She described how the man who wanted to marry her, a war leader named Cachino, had become obsessed with possessing her after her mother died. How he had seen her mixed heritage as something to be dominated and controlled rather than respected. She told Garrett about the night Cachino had attacked her, trying to force the marriage by taking her virtue so she would have no choice but to accept him. How she had fought him off with a knife, leaving a scar across his face that would mark him forever. How her brother, who should have protected her, had instead blamed her for enticing Cachino and bringing shame to their family. "I knew then that I had to leave," she said, her voice hollow with the memory. "If I stayed, they would give me to him anyway, or he would simply take me. Either way, I would lose, so I ran. I stole a horse, some supplies, and I ran as fast and as far as I could." "The bruises I saw when you first arrived," Garrett said slowly. "Your brother," she nodded. "He tried to stop me from leaving. We fought. He gave me this." She touched the faded bruise on her cheek. "And I gave him worse. I'm not proud of hurting my own blood, but I had no choice. It was escape or die slowly in a marriage that would destroy me." Garrett pulled her into his arms, and after a moment's resistance, she let him. She trembled against him, all the fear and exhaustion of the past months finally finding an outlet. He held her while she cried, murmuring reassurances that he would keep her safe, that they would find a way through this. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "What do we do?" "First, we make sure you are never alone and vulnerable," Garrett said. "I will talk to the men, explain the situation. They are good people, they will help protect you. Second, we prepare for the possibility that Cachino and your brother will come here directly. And third, we figure out a more permanent solution." "What permanent solution?" she asked bitterly. "I cannot go back. I would rather die." "You are not going back, and you are not dying," he said firmly. "But maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to make them stop searching. Apache respects strength and honor, right? What if we could negotiate?" She shook her head. "They will not negotiate. Cachino wants me as his property, proof of his dominance. My brother wants to restore family honor. There is nothing to negotiate." "There is always something," Garrett insisted. "I just need to figure out what." Over the next few days, Garrett explained the situation to Frank, Timothy, and Sam. To his relief but not surprise, all 3 men immediately pledged their support. "That girl saved us from another winter of my terrible cooking," Timothy said with a grin that did not quite hide his serious intent. "I would face down an army for her, much less a few angry Apache." Frank was more pragmatic. "We need to fortify the ranch, make it clear that attacking here would cost them too much. Apache are fierce warriors, but they are not stupid. They will not waste lives on a fight they cannot win." Sam, who rarely spoke more than necessary, simply cleaned and checked his rifle. Anyone tries to hurt Miss Danielle, they answer to me. They established watches, making sure someone was always alert and armed. Garrett purchased extra ammunition and made sure everyone knew where the weapons were stored. Dahzi protested the fuss, insisting she was not worth such trouble. But Garrett silenced her objections with a kiss that spoke of his growing feelings more clearly than words ever could. The kiss had been unplanned, born from frustration and fear, and the overwhelming need to make her understand how much she mattered. When he pulled back, Dahzi looked stunned, her fingers touching her lips. "I am sorry," Garrett started to say, but she cut him off. "Do not apologize," she whispered. "Just do not make promises you cannot keep. Do not make me hope for something that cannot be." "Why can it not be?" he challenged. "Because you are Apache and I am white. Because your past is complicated. Dahzi, I do not care about any of that. I care about you, about who you are now, about who we could be together." She wanted to believe him. He could see the longing in her eyes. But fear still held her back. The fear that happiness was not meant for someone who had broken tribal law, who had dishonored her family, who was marked for death or worse. The confrontation came 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning when the sun was burning off the last of the dawn mist. Garrett was in the barn with Sam, checking on a mare that was close to foaling when Timothy came running. "Riders coming," the young cowboy said, breathing hard. "6 of them, Apache from the look of them. They will be here in 10 minutes. Garrett felt his heart drop into his stomach. "Get Dahzi into the house. Tell her to stay away from the windows. Frank, you are with me. Sam, take the west side with your rifle. Timothy, you stay with Dahzi. If anything happens to us, you get her on a horse and ride for Fort Davis. Do not stop until you reach the army." Timothy started to protest, but Garrett cut him off. "That is an order. Her safety is the priority." By the time the 6 riders reached the ranch gate, Garrett and Frank were standing on the porch, rifles held casually but ready. The Apache men were impressive in their bearing, wearing a mix of traditional clothing and items acquired from trading or raids. The man in front bore a fresh scar across his left cheek, puckered and angry looking. Cachino, Garrett realized with cold certainty. Next to Cachino rode a younger man who shared Dahzi's high cheekbones and the shape of her eyes. Her brother, then. The other 4 were warriors, their expressions hard and ready for violence. Cachino spoke first, his English heavily accented but understandable. "You have our woman. Apache woman who belongs to me. You give her back, we go in peace." "No Apache woman here," Garrett replied calmly. "Just my housekeeper, a Mexican woman from El Paso. You have the wrong ranch." Dahzi's brother spat on the ground. "You lie, we have watched. We have seen her in your garden, in your house. That is Dahzi, my sister, and she must return to face justice for her crimes." "What crimes?" Garrett asked. "Running from a forced marriage, defending herself from assault. Those are not crimes, those are acts of survival." Cachino's face darkened with rage. "She is promised to me. She cut my face when I tried to claim what is mine. She is thief and dishonored woman. She comes back or we take her." "Over my dead body," Garrett said quietly, and he meant every word. Frank shifted beside him, his rifle now pointing more directly at the Apache men. From the corner of his eye, Garrett could see Sam positioned at the side of the house, his rifle trained on the group. Cachino laughed, a sound without humor. "You would die for woman who is not your wife. For Apache who means nothing to you. You are fool." "Maybe," Garrett agreed. "But I am a fool who will not let you take her. She does not want to marry you, Cachino. Under Apache law, she has the right to refuse. You dishonor yourself by forcing this." The brother spoke again. "She dishonored our family. Our father's name is ruined because she refused a respected warrior. She must return to make this right." By marrying a man who attacked her. Garrett shook his head. That does not make anything right. That just compounds the wrong. The standoff stretched, tension crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. Garrett was acutely aware that 6-4 were not great odds, especially against Apache warriors who were legendary for their fighting skills. But he also knew that if they showed any weakness, any hesitation, Dahzi would be lost. It was Dahzi herself who broke the stalemate. The front door opened and she stepped onto the porch, ignoring Timothy's frantic whispers behind her. She stood beside Garrett, her spine straight and her head high. "I am Dahzi," she said in Apache, then switched to English. "I am the one you seek, and I tell you now before witnesses I will never return, I will die first." Her brother's face twisted with anger and something that might have been pain. "You shame us, sister. You shame our father's memory." "Our father is dead," Dahzi replied, her voice hard. "And he shamed me long before I ever shamed him. He promised me to Caccino when I was 14, too young to understand what it meant. He ignored our mother's wishes that I be allowed to choose my own path. The shame is his, not mine." Caccino urged his horse forward, stopping just beyond the porch. "You belong to me. It is decided. If you will not come willingly, I will take you. This white man cannot stop me." "This white man is not alone," Garrett said, his voice steady. "And you are right. This might come to bloodshed. But ask yourself, Caccino, is she really worth the lives you will lose? Because I promise you, you will not take her without paying a steep price." For a long moment, Garrett thought his bluff might fail. The Apache warriors looked ready to fight, and Caccino's face was set with determination and wounded pride. Then an older voice spoke from behind the group. "Enough." Everyone turned to see a seventh rider emerging from the brush where he had been watching. He was older than the others, his hair streaked with gray, but his bearing commanded immediate respect. The warriors, even Caccino, deferred to him with visible acknowledgement of his authority. The older man studied the scene before him with sharp, intelligent eyes. When he spoke, his English was excellent. "I am Nanton, war leader of our band. I have been listening to this discussion with great interest." He dismounted and approached the porch, moving with the confident ease of someone who knew his presence alone was protection. Garrett kept his rifle ready but did not aim it at the older man. "You are the rancher who harbors my kinsman's daughter," Nanton said to Garrett. "I am the rancher who employs a woman seeking honest work," Garrett corrected. "What her past might be is her business." Nanton smiled slightly. Diplomatically said, "And you, Dahzi, daughter of Apache, you have changed much since I saw you last." Dahzi's voice was respectful but firm. "I have, grandfather of my cousin, I have chosen a different path. So I see." Nanton turned his attention back to Caccino. "You claim this woman is promised to you. She is," Caccino insisted. "Her father gave his word before he died. She dishonors that word by refusing." "And yet," Nanton said thoughtfully, "Apache women have always had the right to refuse marriage. This has been our way since the old times. A woman forced is a woman who will poison her husband's household with resentment. You know this, Caccino." "She has not simply refused," the brother interjected. "She has fled the tribe, stolen resources, brought shame upon us all." Nanton looked at Dahzi with something that might have been sympathy. "Is this true? Did you leave without permission?" "I did," Dahzi admitted. "Because remaining meant being forced into a marriage to a man who had already attacked me, who scarred me and tried to take by force what I would not give willingly. I chose freedom over submission. If that is a crime, then I am guilty." "She lies," Caccino snarled. "She enticed me, then rejected me to shame me before the tribe." "I have heard enough," Nanton said sharply. "Caccino, I have known you since you were a boy. You are a skilled warrior but also prideful and quick to anger. If this woman bore the mark of your attack when she fled, then you are the one who brought shame, not her." Caccino's face flushed with anger. "You cannot judge me, old man. The council supported my claim." "The council was not aware of the full truth," Nanton replied. "I certainly was not, or I would have spoken against this match long ago. A marriage must be chosen, not forced. This has always been our way." He turned to Garrett. "You care for this woman." Garrett did not hesitate. "I do. I love her and would make her my wife if she would have me." Dahzi turned to stare at him, shock evident on her face. It was not exactly how Garrett had planned to propose, standing on his porch with rifles and angry Apache warriors as witnesses, but the words were out and he would not take them back. Nanton nodded slowly. "And you, Dahzi? You wish to marry this man?" She was silent for a long moment, her eyes locked with Garrett's. Then she said softly, "I do, if he will have me with all my complications and dangers." "Then it is settled," Nanton declared. "Dahzi has chosen her path, as is her right. Caccino, you must accept this and let go of your claim. She is no longer bound to the tribe, no longer subject to its laws or obligations." "This is not right," the brother protested. "She cannot simply walk away from her people." "She can and she has," Nanton said firmly. "It is rare but not without precedent. Those who wish to leave may do so, though they can never return. Dahzi, if you choose this man, choose this life, you will be dead to the tribe. You will have no people, no family among the Apache. You accept these terms?" Dahzi's hand found Garrett's, her fingers lacing through his. "I accept. I made my choice when I ran. This only makes it official." Her brother's face crumpled with a mixture of grief and rage. "Then you are truly dead to me, sister. Do not think you can ever come back, ever find welcome among our fires. You have made your choice." "I have," she said quietly, "and I am sorry for the pain it causes you, but I am not sorry for choosing life over death, freedom over bondage." Caccino sat on his horse, fury radiating from every line of his body. For a moment, Garrett thought the man might attack anyway, pride overriding reason. But Nanton's presence and authority held him in check. "We are finished here," Nanton announced. "Dahzi is no longer of the Apache. She is dead to us. We will not return, we will not seek her out. Her debts are paid with her exile." He looked at Garrett. "You are a brave man to stand against us. Treat her well, or I will consider our agreement void." "I will spend every day of my life making sure she is happy and safe," Garrett promised. The Apache warriors turned their horses and rode away, Caccino and Dahzi's brother casting dark looks back, but following Nanton's lead. When they were finally out of sight, Garrett felt the tension drain from his body, leaving him almost weak with relief. Dahzi collapsed against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close while she shook with the release of months of fear and stress. Timothy and Sam emerged from their positions, and Frank lowered his rifle with a gusty sigh. "Well," Frank said, "that was exciting. Let us not do it again anytime soon." They all laughed, the sound slightly manic with leftover adrenaline. Garrett guided Dahzi into the house, settling her in a chair while Timothy put on coffee and Sam fetched her some water. She sipped it slowly, her hands still trembling. "Did you mean it?" she asked Garrett. "About wanting to marry me?" He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I meant every word. I know the circumstances were not romantic, and I am sorry for that. But Dahzi, I love you. I think I have been falling in love with you since that first day when you showed up at my gate, brave and terrified and so determined to survive. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were happy tears. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Garrett Branson. You saved my life in more ways than one. How could I not love you?" He kissed her then, properly and thoroughly, not caring that his ranch hands were watching and grinning like fools. When they finally pulled apart, Timothy was actually wiping away tears of his own. "About time," Frank grumbled, but he was smiling. "Now, maybe we can get back to the boring work of running a ranch instead of all this excitement." They were married 2 weeks later in Terlingua, with the circuit preacher officiating and half the town in attendance. Dahzi wore a simple dress of pale blue that Garrett had purchased from the general store, along with a silver comb for her hair that had belonged to his mother. She was so beautiful it made his heart ache. The townspeople were curious about the bride's background, but Garrett and Dahzi had agreed on a story that was mostly true. She was the daughter of a Mexican woman and had been living in Mexico before coming to Texas seeking work. It was close enough to the truth to be believable, and the townsfolk were generally more interested in the quality of her cooking at the reception than her pedigree. Herbert Morrow, the storekeeper, pulled Garrett aside during the celebration. "I am happy for you, Garrett. And I want you to know, whatever that young lady's real story is, it is nobody's business but yours. She is good people, anyone can see that. You made a fine choice." Garrett clasped the man's shoulder gratefully. "Thank you, Herbert. That means a lot." That night, in the room Garrett had spent the previous weeks preparing for his bride, Dahzi sat on the edge of their bed and looked around with wonder. "Is this real?" she whispered. "Am I truly safe, truly free?" Garrett sat beside her, taking her hand. "You are. We are married. The tribe has let you go, and this is our home. Our life together starts now." She leaned against him, and he felt the last of her tension finally release. "I never thought I could be this happy, never thought I deserved it." "You deserve everything good this world has to offer," he told her. "And I am going to spend every day making sure you know that." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them approaching the intimacy with care and reverence for what they were building together. Garrett was patient, letting Dahzi set the pace, knowing that her past assault had left scars that went deeper than the physical. She cried afterward, but when he worriedly asked if he had hurt her, she shook her head. "Happy tears," she explained. "I never knew it could be like this. Gentle and beautiful instead of violent and frightening. You have given me back something I thought was destroyed." As the months passed, their love deepened and their life together found its rhythm. Dahzi thrived in her new role as Garrett's wife, no longer just a housekeeper but a true partner in running the ranch. She had a gift with the animals, especially the horses, and Sam was delighted to have someone who shared his passion for working with them. She also became a fixture in Terlingua, known for her generous heart and her remarkable cooking. When a family in town fell on hard times, Dahzi organized the ranchwomen to provide meals and support. When a child fell ill, she showed up with remedies her mother had taught her, herbs and treatments that combined Mexican and Apache wisdom. The town doctor was initially skeptical, but came to respect her knowledge after she helped save a man's life when he suffered a snake bite. "You would have made an excellent healer," the doctor told her. "If you ever want to apprentice with me, learn more formal medicine, I would be honored to teach you." Dahzi discussed it with Garrett that night. Would it be acceptable? A married woman studying medicine. "If it is what you want, then absolutely," Garrett assured her. "Dahzi, you do not need my permission to pursue your interests. We are partners, not master and servant." So she began studying with the doctor twice a week, learning to read medical texts and expanding her natural healing knowledge with formal training. Garrett was proud of her dedication and the respect she earned from the community. A year after their wedding, Dahzi discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a certain amount of terror. She worried about childbirth, having seen her own mother die and knowing how dangerous it could be. Garrett worried about Dahzi's health and whether he would be a good father. "We will figure it out together," she told him, placing his hand on her still, flat belly. "This child is wanted and loved already. That is more than many children have." Their son was born on a spring morning in 1881, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him Gabriel after Garrett's father. Garrett cried when he first held the tiny bundle, overwhelmed with love and responsibility. Dahzi, exhausted but radiant, watched her husband and son with tears of joy streaming down her own face. "We made him," she whispered in wonder. "We made this perfect little person." Gabriel was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Deanna Rose. She had her mother's dark hair and eyes, and Garrett's stubborn determination became evident early. Dahzi sometimes spoke to the children in Spanish and taught them Apache words as well, wanting them to understand all the parts of their heritage. "Will you tell them the truth about my past?" she asked Garrett one evening after the children were asleep. "When they are older." "I think we should," he said carefully. "Not the details that would hurt or frighten them, but the truth about your courage in choosing freedom. They should know their mother is a hero." She laughed at that. "I am no hero. I just ran away. You stood up against an entire tribe's expectations. You chose your own path when it would have been easier to submit. You survived when many would have given up. Dahzi, you are absolutely a hero. Our children should know that." As the years passed, their family grew and prospered. A third child, another son named David, arrived in 1885. The ranch expanded, their hard work and dedication paying off in increased land and cattle. Garrett took on more ranch hands, including a young Mexican man who reminded Dahzi of her mother's family, and she took special care to make him feel welcome. The children grew up loved and happy, surrounded by the strange but beautiful mix of cultures that was their heritage. They learned ranching from their father, healing arts from their mother, and how to navigate a world that did not always look kindly on those who were different. Gabriel, in particular, inherited his mother's gifts with horses and plants, while Deanna Rose showed early signs of her mother's healing abilities. Timothy Walsh, who had remained at the ranch and become like family, married a girl from town and built a house on the property with Garrett's blessing. Frank retired eventually but stayed nearby, unable to fully leave the land he loved. Sam continued working with the horses until arthritis made it too difficult, at which point he transitioned to teaching Gabriel everything he knew. One evening, about 10 years after their wedding, Dahzi and Garrett sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant colors. The sounds of their children playing in the yard mixed with the evening calls of birds settling for the night. "You ever regret it?" Garrett asked. "Leaving your people, your heritage?" Dahzi was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "I regret the pain it caused my brother, the family connection that was lost, but regret my choice. Never, not for a single moment." "You gave me a life I never dreamed possible, Garrett. Freedom, love, children, respect. These things would have been impossible in the life I was running from." "I did not give you those things," he corrected gently. "We built them together. You are the strongest person I know, Dahzi. I am grateful every day that you appeared at my gate, that you trusted me enough to stay, that you let me love you." She leaned against him, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long familiarity. "I was so afraid that day, standing at your gate. Afraid you would turn me away, afraid you would turn me in, afraid to hope for kindness. You could have done any of those things, but you chose compassion instead. You saved my life." "And you saved mine," he replied. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions without joy or purpose beyond survival. You brought light into my life, Dahzi. You made me remember how to be happy." They sat together until the stars emerged, content in the life they had built and the love they shared. Their story was unconventional, their beginning fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they had created something beautiful from those difficult circumstances. The next morning, Dahzi woke early as always, slipping from bed to watch the sunrise from the kitchen window while she prepared coffee. This was still her favorite time of day, when the world was quiet and full of possibility. She heard Garrett's footsteps behind her and smiled as his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Good morning, my love," he murmured, kissing her neck. "Good morning," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. After a decade together, she still felt the flutter of butterflies when he looked at her with such open affection. They were interrupted by the sound of small feet thundering down the stairs. 6-year-old David burst into the kitchen, followed more sedately by Deanna, Rose, and Gabriel. "Mama, Papa, can we go riding today?" David asked, his enthusiasm boundless even at this early hour. "After chores and breakfast," Dahzi told him, ruffling his hair. "Gabriel, can you help your brother with the chickens?" "Deanna, Rose, will you set the table?" The children scattered to their tasks, and Dahzi returned to preparing breakfast. This was her life now, ordinary and extraordinary at once. The smell of coffee and baking bread, the laughter of her children, the solid presence of her husband beside her. She had been hiding when she arrived at this ranch, running from a past that threatened to consume her. Now she was no longer hiding, no longer running. She was home. Later that day, after the promised ride and an afternoon spent in the garden teaching Deanna Rose about medicinal plants, Dahzi found herself thinking about her brother. She wondered occasionally what had become of him, whether he had found happiness, or was still consumed by the need to restore family honor. She hoped he was well. That time had healed some of the hurt between them. She also thought about Caccino sometimes, though those thoughts were less charitable. The scar she had given him would mark him for life, a constant reminder of the woman who had refused to be his prize. She hoped he had learned from the experience, that perhaps some other woman had benefited from his humiliation. But mostly, she tried not to think about him at all. He was part of a past she had left behind, and dwelling on it served no purpose. That evening, as she tucked the children into bed, Gabriel asked her a question that surprised her. "Mama, why do you talk different than Papa sometimes?" She sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "What do you mean, sweetheart? The words you use when you sing to us or when you talk to the plants. They are different from English or Spanish. What language is that?" Dahzi looked at her oldest son, seeing the genuine curiosity in his eyes. He was 9 years old enough to begin understanding complex truths. "That is Apache, the language of my father's people." "So you are Apache?" he asked. "I thought you were Mexican." "I am both," she explained. "My mother was Mexican, my father was Apache. I grew up speaking both languages, learning both cultures. It is part of who I am and part of who you are too." Gabriel considered this seriously. "Why do not you talk about it more, about being Apache?" "Because it is complicated," she said honestly. "When I was young, I had to leave my father's people. It was not safe for me to stay. Coming here to Papa's ranch was the beginning of my new life. But the old life is still part of me, and I want to share it with you children. The good parts, at least. Will you teach us?" he asked. The Apache words and stories. She felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, my son, I will teach you. Not to replace who you are, but to add to it. You are many things, Gabriel. You are Apache and Mexican and American. All of these parts make you who you are." After the children were asleep, she told Garrett about the conversation. He listened thoughtfully, then said, "I think it is good. They should know their heritage, all of it. We do not have to hide anymore, Dahzi. We are established here, respected. People know you as the healer, the rancher's wife, the woman who helped rebuild the church after the fire. Whatever your past was, your present is secure." She knew he was right. Over the years, she had built a reputation and a life that could not be easily threatened. Even if someone discovered her Apache heritage, it would change nothing. She was Garrett Branson now, mother, wife, healer. Dahzi had not died when she left her tribe. She had simply been transformed, become someone new while keeping the best parts of who she had been. As time continued its inexorable march forward, Dahzi found herself increasingly comfortable sharing her dual heritage with her children and the wider community. She began attending the Apache storytelling nights that occasionally happened in the Mexican quarter of Terlingua, where people of various indigenous backgrounds would share the old stories in hushed reverence. She brought her children, wanting them to understand the richness of the traditions she carried. Word spread that the rancher's wife was part Apache, but by then it mattered little. She had proven herself too valuable to the community, too integral to its fabric, for prejudice to take root. When anyone did question her background, they were quickly shouted down by those she had helped, those whose children she had healed, whose families she had fed during hard times. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Garrett surprised her with a gift that made her cry. He had commissioned a local craftsman to create a medicine bag in the Apache style, decorated with beadwork that incorporated symbols from both Apache and Mexican traditions. Inside were tools for her healing work, along with a letter he had written expressing his love and admiration for her courage. "You honor all of who I am," she told him, clutching the bag to her chest. "Not just the parts that are convenient or comfortable, but all of me. How did I get so lucky?" "Luck had nothing to do with it," he replied. "You made a brave choice, and I was fortunate enough to be there when you did. Everything good in my life has come from that moment when you appeared at my gate." Their love story became something of a legend in Terlingua, told and retold with varying degrees of accuracy. Some versions had Garrett fighting off 100 warriors single-handedly. Others claimed Dahzi was an Apache princess who had given up a kingdom for love. The truth was both simpler and more profound than any legend. Two people had found each other in difficult circumstances, chosen love over fear, and built a life together through hard work and dedication. As their children grew into young adults, Dahzi watched with pride as they navigated the world with confidence and compassion. Gabriel became a renowned horse trainer, his skills sought after by ranchers throughout Texas. Deanna Rose followed in her mother's footsteps, eventually taking over most of the healing practice as Dahzi aged. David chose a different path entirely, becoming a teacher and dedicating himself to educating children of all backgrounds, influenced by his mother's example of breaking down barriers. In 1900, as a new century dawned, Garrett and Dahzi celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and friends. They were in their 50s now, their hair graying and their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young man who had offered shelter without question and the young woman who had been brave enough to accept it. 20 years, Dahzi marveled, looking around at the gathered crowd. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a whole lifetime." "It has been a lifetime," Garrett said. "The best lifetime I could have imagined, and with luck, we have many more years ahead of us." They did have more years, though not as many as either would have liked. Garrett passed away in 1908 at the age of 61, his heart giving out while he was doing the work he loved, mending fence on the northern section of the ranch. Dahzi was devastated by the loss, feeling as though part of herself had been torn away. But she was surrounded by love and support, by the children and grandchildren whose existence was a testament to the love she and Garrett had shared. She lived another 12 years, continuing her healing work almost until the end. She taught her grandchildren Apache songs and stories, ensuring that part of their heritage would not be forgotten. She watched the world change around her, marveling at automobiles and airplanes and all the strange new inventions that were transforming the American landscape. On a spring morning in 1920, Dahzi passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 63. She was buried beside Garrett on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a stone that bore both her Anglo name and her Apache one. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched, a testament to the impact one brave woman could have on her community. Her children and grandchildren continued to honor her memory and her legacy. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations, with each successive owner adding their own chapter to its story. But it all traced back to that day in 1879, when a desperate Apache woman appeared at the gate, begging for work instead of money, and a cowboy looked past his own prejudices and fears to see a human being in need. Their love story, born from desperation and danger, had blossomed into something that touched countless lives. It proved that love could transcend cultural boundaries, that courage and compassion could overcome prejudice and fear, and that the choices we make in moments of crisis can echo through generations. Dahzi had been hiding from her tribe, running for her life, when she found Garrett. But in finding him, she had also found herself, found the strength to live openly and honestly, found a love that sustained her through all the challenges life brought. And in the end, that was the real story, the one worth telling. Not the dramatic confrontation or the dangerous escape, but the quiet, steady love that grew between two people who chose each other every day for the rest of their lives. That was the legacy they left behind, the gift they gave to their children and their children's children. And it all began with an act of faith and kindness on a dusty Texas ranch in the Wild West, when a cowboy realized that sometimes the best decisions are made not with the head but with the heart.